This is how El Chapo escaped prison, one of the most ingenious escapes in history. The prison break stories are very interesting, and the story of El Chapo's escape from prison is one of the craziest stories. For anyone who doesn't know El Chapo, he's one of the biggest drug dealers in the world. He was the leader of the biggest cartel gang in Mexico called the Sinaloa Cartel. Although Pablo Escobar is far more famous than him, El Chapo is considered the strongest drug lord in the world, perhaps not in terms of wealth, but in terms of power and influence. However, his fortune is still very huge, and he was able to accumulate during his career a fortune that equals 14 billion US dollars. In this video, we'll talk about the insane escape operation that this criminal carried out in order to escape from prison. In fact, El Chapo managed to escape from prison twice. He was arrested for the first time in 1993. They put him in a federal prison, which is one of the strongest prisons in Mexico, where he spent several years. In 2001, he managed to escape through threats and bribes that he paid to prison guards. According to what's said, El Chapo fled using a dirty closed carriage, meaning that he hid inside it. However, what really helped him was the path in front of him was open because of the bribes he paid. After that, he remained free for several years. After great efforts and great cooperation between the Mexican and American authorities, they were able to arrest him again in 2014. Of course, America was interested in the matter because the largest amount of drugs in America came from the El Chapo gang. Accordingly, the authorities put huge budgets and strong forces to fight against drug cartels like this from within Mexico itself, certainly in coordination and cooperation with the Mexican authorities. With great help from them, the Mexican authorities were able to arrest El Chapo a second time. The American authorities asked that El Chapo be handed over to them, and the reason, of course, that they believe that the Mexican authorities and forces are corrupt, and it's possible that El Chapo will take advantage of that to escape from prison a second time. However, the Mexican authorities refused this and said they would make sure he had no chance of running away. They actually put El Chapo in their strongest prison. But what they didn't expect was that El Chapo would carry out the most complex escape operation ever. The El Chapo gang is known for its tunneling capability because their smuggling business depends on the tunnels they dig between Mexico and America. While inside prison, El Chapo gave orders to his gang to dig a tunnel with a length of 1.5 kilometers under the prison. The loyal men actually began to do what they were ordered to do, and the tunnel digging began immediately after El Chapo was prisoned. The men were digging the tunnel about 10 meters below the ground. Of course, they couldn't use large or electric drilling machines because these kind of machines could cause the process to be exposed. So drilling was done using hand tools, which caused the drilling to take a longer time. However, the drilling process was professionally done and the planning was genius. First, the El Chapo gang bought a plot of land in the closest possible area to the prison and built on this land the walls of empty rooms in order to cover the digging of the tunnel, as the rooms were just external structures. Despite all this professional work, the operation should have been completed as soon as possible because, due to the Black Chapo history of prisons, there was a possibility of transferring him from this prison to another in order to nullify any escape plan that he might think of. The El Chapo gang were under great pressure and were working day and night in order to complete the tunnel as quickly as possible. In addition, the house they built began to attract people's attention. Why is there a house built on an empty plot of land where there's nothing next to it? So this attention put more pressure on them, and time slowly began to run out for them. On the other side, El Chapo was pretending to be the ideal prisoner inside the prison, and he even tried to build a good relationship with the prison guards and the other prisoners in order for these suspicions to be minimal. Of course, even with these good behaviors, prison officials were aware of him and the tricks that he could do. This is why all the phone calls, messages that reach him, and any communication between him and the outside world were monitored. However, there was no hint of anything abnormal, nor any thread that could raise suspicions among officials or guards that the digging was taking place under their custody. El Chapo was trying to be as patient as possible, but he was running out of patience, and he was afraid that he'd be transferred to another prison at any moment. El Chapo's men knew that they had a great challenge ahead of them from the beginning, but even with great pressure, they were able to reach El Chapo before any possible transferring operation. Surprisingly, they were able to finish digging the tunnel within 16 months only. And accordingly to estimates by the experts in this field, a tunnel like this was supposed to take at least 2 years. Their ability to accomplish this in 16 months was astonishing. As we said, the tunnel was dug professionally. The first thing was its ceiling and walls that were supported by panels and wooden poles. In addition, there were generators that were used to light the tunnel thoroughly. On top of that, there was a clean air pump motor to maintain the oxygen level in the tunnel. They also built a railroad in the ground and put a specially modified bike on it. The bike was attached to 2 carts that were apparently used to remove dirt and stones from the tunnel. Of course, the amount of dirt that they took out was enormous, and they were afraid that people would notice that something suspicious was happening if they collected it outside the house. They used to take it out in small quantities and distribute it around the house so that they could keep the ground reasonably flat. Certainly, the presence of large quantities of clean dirt may attract doubts, suspicions, and questions that are difficult for the fake construction team to answer. For this, the pressure on them was increasing day after day. The promised day finally arrived on July 12, 2015. The tunnel finally reached El Chapo's cell, and as soon as El Chapo heard the sounds of his men piercing the ground under his cell, he went down into the hole immediately. A video was filmed by the CCTV of El Chapo disappearing behind a wall that was used to cover him from surveillance when he needs to be given a little privacy while using the bathroom. His men knew exactly where to dig because apparently they had an outline of the entire prison. Their aim was to open the hatch exactly in the place which is hidden from the camera in order to delay the detection of the escape process as long as possible. When El Chapo came down to the tunnel, they let him ride the bike that was directly on the railway so that he could escape as quickly as possible. Needless to say, they had already separated the carts used to extract dirt out of the tunnel. Therefore, when El Chapo reached the other side, his gang was waiting for him. They gave him new clothes and led him to one of the construction trucks that was prepared for his escape. Thus, El Chapo succeeded in carrying out one of the largest prison operations in history. After all this, El Chapo was arrested for the 3rd time several months later. Clearly, a person like El Chapo cannot live a stable life and always moves from place to place and from house to house. These houses that he moved to are called safe houses. Before he moved to one of the safe houses, local residents noticed the presence of men armed with heavy weapons, so they contacted the authorities and alerted them about the matter. The authorities in turn put the house under surveillance and kept spying on the calls coming from the house. In one of the calls, a piece of information that says that the grandmother will visit the house. Of course, they knew directly that the grandmother meant a great leader or a very important person, and was certainly one of the most wanted. The authorities prepared themselves and their special forces for a strong storming of the house after the arrival of this target. Indeed, a few weeks later, this important person arrived, and it turned out that the grandmother was the boss, El Chapo himself. The authorities did not rush the process, but rather waited for their appropriate opportunity. Finally, the moment's come and the special forces stormed the house and killed a number of El Chapo's guards, his assistants, and his gang. But as if El Chapo vowed not to catch him. The man escaped again by using a preset tunnel under a bathtub in one of the bathrooms of the house. Apparently, his gang's digging tunnels for him everywhere as a last resort to escape against any possible surprises. El Chapo stole the closest car he found in front of him, but he couldn't escape and he was stopped by some federal policemen. El Chapo was briefly happy, knowing that the level of corruption in the police is much greater than the level of corruption in the army or special forces. He immediately offered them a bribe with famous numbers in order to leave him alone. Unfortunately, his expectations were disappointed, and the 4 policemen were honest and refused his offer. When El Chapo saw that bribing didn't work, he decided to use the threat and told them they would die because of their choice. Police officers contacted their superiors immediately after arresting him. However, their superiors told them they had information that a huge convoy of El Chapo gangsters were coming towards them. They were told to hunker down in a small hotel near the area and to prepare themselves for a direct confrontation with a large number of El Chapo men who would be armed with heavy weapons. The policemen were holed up in one of the rooms while El Chapo kept laughing at them and repeating his threats that this would be the last moment of their lives and that they would die today, and then their families. Therefore, the policemen began preparing for the inevitable confrontation once they heard the rumbling of oncoming car engines. As soon as the cars reached the place, El Chapo's threats turned to tears as he saw that the cars and trucks of the Army and Special Forces were parked at the hotel. Soldiers were distributed in the place, and the area was completely fortified. It was ready for any mad attack that could be carried out by El Chapo guerrillas to save their leader. Anyway, no men appeared at the scene. This time, El Chapo will have no chance to escape because the Mexican authorities agreed to hand him over to America for trial and imprisonment in an American prison. To this day, El Chapo sits in a very fortified cell. His cell's in solitary confinement. Even the sunlight doesn't reach it. He stays there for 23 hours a day, and he's not allowed to smell fresh air or see the sun's rays except for 1 hour a day.